I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head,
Hello from South Africa and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. Timmy also welcomes you to, for some, the most annoying voice in true crime. Now, is who we are the drawings we draw? Is who we are the books we read? Is who we are the images we have in our mind? John Ray seems to be making the case that the entirety of who Victoria Heuermann, who she is, can be derived from a half dozen sketches. Now, you might feel confident that that's true, but what if somebody did that to you, took a handful of things and said, this is who you are, these are your motives, this is what you've done? Now, if who you are can be seen from the nuances in our handwriting, why not from our more elaborate sketches as well? I'm confused though. If an artist who painted on a daily basis like Vincent van Gogh had such dark, depressing and despairing impulses regarding himself, I mean, isn't that what you believe? Isn't that what you believe, that Van Gogh was this troubled, mad artist, right? Like Victoria Heuermann. Why isn't it in his art then? Why is his art bright and colourful? Have you ever looked at the art in the last few weeks of his life? Endless iterations of quaint, sun-drenched landscapes. Where's the disquiet? Where's the darkness? Where's the already troubled mind within those brushstrokes?
Why do you lay these troubles on an already troubled mind?
Of course, that's not to say art, our own or that which we preoccupy ourselves with, doesn't resonate with some aspect within ourselves.
Did you consciously not draw John Bonet?
I don't really remember what was going through my head, but she was gone, so I didn't draw her.
And that was just 13 days after her death. Burke Ramsey was asked to draw this sketch. And that's super quick to have accepted and internalized her permanent absence from the family and the status of the new family unit. So certainly there is a place for these sketches in true crime. The question is it applicable with Victoria? So if we think about some kind of collaboration, some kind of, some kind of conspiracy, I guess, between Victoria and Rex, is that possible? What do you think? Is it possible? Before we get to that, and this is going to be the proper deep dive that I promised you, it's going to be taking us into Ernest Becker and how he drills down. It's a really, really deep dive into the psychology, and then we're going to go even deep in the next analysis. If you're interested in this, please first of all, subscribe if you haven't already. If you're not enjoying this analysis, please dislike, despair, leave a shitty comment, but I must really applaud those of you who did express your appreciation. This is the kind of thing that I find very interesting, and I think there's so much to learn from this area in true crime when we go into the psychology. And of course, we've got to take ourselves out of the whole process and try and understand who we're dealing with. And then we can kind of think about ourselves at the end of that. In any event, thanks for all the positive comments. And let's get started with this analysis. I want to start by sharing something personal to me about a dark period I went into when I was a teenager. I read a lot of Stephen King. How about you? I read about a girl who had pig's blood spilled all over at the prom. I read stories about a possessed car that killed everyone its driver didn't like. Do you remember Firestarter? You remember the plot for Firestarter? Or the generic plot on Wikipedia is that Andy and Charlie, that's Andrew and Charlene McGee, they are a father-daughter pair. They're on the run from a government agency known as The Shop During his college years, Andy had participated in a shop experiment dealing with Lot 6, a drug with hallucinogenic effects similar to LSD. The drug gave his future wife Victoria, funny enough, that's her name, Vicky Tomlinson, minor telekinetic abilities, and him a telepathic form of mind control he refers to as the push. They both also developed telepathic abilities. Andy's and Vicky's powers were physiologically limited. In his case, overuse of the push gives him crippling migraine headaches and minute brain hemorrhages. But their daughter, Charlie, develops a frighteningly strong pyrokinetic ability. And so you can see where this is going, can't you? At Andy's instruction, Charlie unleashes her power. And so the question is, at Rex's instruction, what did Victoria do? What was she supposed to be doing? Was Victoria bullied as a young person? Did Victoria grow up in a similar kind of military type household to Rex Heuermann? And you might think that that's a strange thing to say. You know, did a potential serial killer bring up his daughter better than he was brought up? Well, the answer might be yes. In any event, John Ray and his band of witch hunters, are you one of them, by the way? Are you one of the witch hunters? Let's accuse Victoria of murder. Well, let's not. Because a lot of these people seem to be imagining the same thing as something out of a Stephen King book. If it's not Asa who's Heuermann's right-hand man, then it must be his daughter. If only psychology was so simple. And so what I'm seeing is vastly oversimplified, to put it mildly. You might say, okay, so if it's so simple, give us the more complicated analysis. You know, what's really going on here? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Now, again, just to bring it on to me, some of my favorite films are incredibly horrific. There's the claustrophobia-inducing face huggers and chest bursters in Alien. What could be more grotesque than that? I mean, what does that say about me? When I was in Myrtle Beach, I watched 3 ultra violent films: Wanted, Kill Bill, and Kill Bill Volume 2. Does that mean I'm a violent person? Does that mean I own guns or swords? Well, actually, I do own a sword, but even on the flight from New York to London, I think it was, I watched a film on the aircraft. I think it's called Poor Things. And I couldn't help thinking, wow, I can't really believe that the airline allows something this almost X-rated as sort of part of the sort of public fodder. Does that say something about anybody? Or is that just kind of what is part of the mainstream media and mainstream movies these days? I mean, should people be arrested on their movie choices? Should they be arrested on their pornography preferences? Should they? Should you? Why not? Why shouldn't they be? And I think nothing could better illustrate my point raised in deep dive number 6 about how terrible many of us are, if not most, when it comes to psychological profile, or even just psychology in general. Even psychologists, certainly many that I look at, aren't terribly good at psychology. On the Dr. Phil show, we've seen his assessment of certain people in the Ramsey case. How astute is that? And what we see here is the ridiculously simplistic derivation of a person from the tiniest of samples. The fact that people are completely comfortable doing it to others shows the hypocrisy at work here. I mean, did Victoria not also have positive sketches? Well, where are they? Would you just highlight the ones that suit your argument? Where are the other sketches? What are they about? If you think about anyway, let's continue. You know, you imagine if you ought to face arrest based only on a recent Google search or based on a single antisocial post, perhaps about the government that you liked. Should that be enough to decide who you are as a person? Of course not. And so that brings us at last 10 minutes in to the central question that we're dealing with. What is the core of the self? And such a fascinating question. What is the core of who you are? And more pertinently, what is the core of these criminals we are dealing with, but more specifically Rex Heuermann? And you may notice that I'm not really even bothering to deal with the core of Victoria or the core of Issa, because it would be a waste of time. We are dealing with the prime suspect in the Long Island serial killer case. And so we want to know what his core is, right? How do we get to it? Well, it's time for me to step aside and allow Mr. Becker to have the floor. And so he deals with the core of the self. Now, to get to the core of the self, Becker applies what he calls psychoanalytic characterology. What's that? I have no idea. So let's see what he writes about that. And these are his words. If the reader gets a feeling of pathos in all this, it is only logical. After all, the humanization process is one in which we exchange a natural animal sense of our basic worth for a contrived symbolic one. Then we are constantly forced to harangue others to establish who we are, because we no longer belong to ourselves. Now just think about the idea of that. Think about this idea, which is actually common to all of us. We harangue others to establish who we are, right? Think about that in the terms of the criminal mythos of Rex Heuermann, allegedly, is that he's haranguing, to use a very mild term, allegedly, several women in a physical way and God knows what other ways. And he's doing that, why? To establish who he is. And why? Why is that? Why do we need to do that? Why do we need other people to be part of this whole process? Because our characters have become social. As children, they start off as something else, let's say animal characters, and the creations of our parents. But eventually our characters become social. And there's no time when that is more explicit than when we're teenagers and young adults. Alfred Adler, according to Becker, saw with beautiful clarity that the basic process in the formation of character was the child's need to be somebody in the symbolic world, since physically nature had put him into an impossible position. The child is faced with the anxieties of his own life and experience, as well as the need to accommodate to the superior powers of his trainers, and from all this somehow to salvage a sense of superiority and confidence. And how can he do this? Well, by choosing a symbolic action system. Now, all of us exchange a natural animal sense of our basic worth for a contrived symbolic one. Now, that might sound like Greek to you, but it's not really that complicated. We come into the world as babies and infants, and a lot of our life is about sleeping and eating and avoiding pain and pursuing pleasure and being praised by our parents and excrement and managing excrement. And that's really all it is. It's really animalistic. And we eventually grow out of that and want to find our basic worth in a contrived symbolic system. And that's another way of saying we want to be told how good we are. We want to be rewarded with money for how good we are. So let's see if we're starting to make baby steps in this profiling thing.